Have you ever heard a story so disturbing it sticks with you? The kind that makes you second-guess that noise outside your window or feel like someone's watching you when you're alone? Well, thanks to TikTok, these stories are spreading faster than ever. Today, I've got 3 real horror stories from TikTok that will do just that. And if you think you're safe, think again. But before we get into it, if you love creepy content and want more real horror stories, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you terrifying tales. Now let's get into it. Ethan was mindlessly scrolling through TikTok late one night when he stumbled upon a video that sent a chill up his spine. It was about hikers disappearing under mysterious circumstances, vanishing without a trace, leaving their campsites untouched, their gear still neatly packed. The comments were flooded with eerie encounters, shadowy figures seen just beyond the tree line, strange whispers carried by the wind, the unsettling feeling of being watched. He scoffed. It was just another internet ghost story. A week later, Ethan set out on a solo hike in the dense, misty forests of the Pacific Northwest. He wasn't new to hiking, he'd done plenty of solo trips before, but something about this trail felt different. The air was thick with silence, save for the occasional rustling of leaves. The towering pines stood unnaturally still. Even the birds seemed quieter than usual. It started subtly. The first time he stopped to take a sip of water, he heard it. An extra footstep, not an echo, not the crunch of settling earth. An actual step, just a second too late. He whipped around. Nothing. Brushing it off as paranoia, he continued. But the feeling lingered. Every time he paused, it happened again. Step. A fraction of a second after his own, like someone was mirroring his movements. He shook his head, telling himself he was overthinking. The sun dipped behind the mountains as he set up camp for the night. The fire crackled softly, offering some comfort, but his unease never fully faded. Then, just as he was about to crawl into his tent, he saw it. A man, standing between the trees, motionless. Far enough away that Ethan couldn't make out his features, but close enough that he knew, without a doubt, the figure was watching him. "Hey!" Ethan called out, forcing his voice to sound firm. No response. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even shift its weight, just stood there, blackened by the shadows. Ethan reached for his flashlight and clicked it on. Nothing. The figure was gone. His stomach tightened. He swept the beam of light across the trees, empty. Had he imagined it? That night, sleep was impossible. Every time he drifted off, a soft sound woke him. A twig snapping, the whisper of leaves, the near imperceptible sound of breathing. At one point, he swore he felt something near the tent, right outside. He held his breath. The breathing was faint, steady. He gripped his flashlight, heart hammering. With a quick motion, he unzipped the tent and shined the beam outside. Nothing. The trees stood silent, the world still. But the moment he turned the light off, he felt it again. Something was out there. At the first sign of dawn, he packed up in record time, eager to put distance between himself and whatever had lurked in the darkness. The forest felt different now, heavier, as if something unseen was pressing in on him. He kept glancing over his shoulder, that gnawing unease clawing at his ribs. Then he saw the footprints. His own, leading back the way he had come, and right beside them, another set, perfectly in sync with his, not ahead, not behind, beside him. Whoever or whatever had been there, they had been walking with him the entire time. Ethan never hiked alone again. When he shared his story online, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of people flooded the comments, claiming they had seen similar figures deep in the woods, silent watchers who never spoke, never moved, and never left a trace. Not until it was too late. Lisa sat in her car, scrolling through TikTok to keep herself awake on the long, empty highway. The video on her screen was one of those urban legend compilations, this one about cursed roadside stops. If you ever find an abandoned gas station still running, don't stop. She smirked, shaking her head. Just another internet myth. But then, 2 hours later, her gas light flickered on. The highway stretched endlessly before her, nothing but darkness and desert. Her phone had no signal, and the last town had been over an hour ago. She cursed under her breath. If she didn't find a station soon, she'd be stranded. Then up ahead, she saw it, a gas station. It looked wrong. The pumps were rusted, their hoses swaying slightly in the dry wind. The fluorescent lights above the station flickered erratically, buzzing like dying insects. A single, flickering open sign glowed in the window of the convenience store. Lisa hesitated. It looked abandoned, but the lights were on, and she was running on fumes. She pulled in. The moment she stepped out of the car, the air felt different. Thicker, heavy with something stale and unmoving. No crickets, no wind, just silence. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The inside smelled musty, like a place that hadn't seen a real customer in years. Shelves were mostly empty, lined with faded bags of chips and expired candy. The refrigerator hummed loudly, condensation dripping down its glass doors. Behind the counter stood an old man. His skin was pale, almost grey under the fluorescent light. His eyes were hollow, sunken deep into his skull, and he stared at the register with an eerie stillness. He didn't greet her, didn't even acknowledge her. Lisa cleared her throat, trying to shake the unease. "Pump 2, please." The man moved slowly, methodically, pressing buttons on the register without a word. Then, a whisper. So soft she almost didn't catch it. "Don't look at them." Lisa froze. Her fingers tightened around the bills in her hand. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old man didn't react, didn't lift his gaze, just shoved her change at her, his fingers unnaturally cold as they brushed against hers. His eyes never left the register. Her stomach twisted. Then she saw it. In the convex mirror in the corner of the store, the kind that let cashiers see the whole room, she saw them. Figures. Standing near the door, tall, unmoving. They weren't there a second ago. A cold wave of dread crashed over her. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run. She spun around. Nothing. The store was empty, but the mirror still showed them. Closer now. Lisa's breath hitched. She bolted for the exit, shoving the door open so hard it banged against the frame. The air outside was suffocatingly still. She fumbled with her keys, heart pounding, half expecting to feel cold fingers close around her shoulder. She yanked the door open, jumped in, and slammed it shut. Through the windshield, she saw the old man, still behind the counter, still staring at the register, but this time his lips moved. She couldn't hear the words. She didn't want to hear them. Slamming the gas pedal, she sped off down the highway, her hands trembling against the wheel. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The gas station was dark, the windows boarded up, the door chained shut, like it had been abandoned for years. Her stomach dropped. Had it looked like that the whole time? Later, when she posted about the experience, the comments flooded in. I saw them too. I barely made it out. The mirror? Always check the mirror. Lisa locked her phone. She didn't want to see anymore. She didn't want to remember, because when she closed her eyes, she could still see them. Standing, waiting. And this time, she wasn't sure if they were still behind her. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the clearing as Sam and his friends passed around their phones, scrolling through TikTok. It was one of those late-night spirals, urban legends, cryptid sightings, eerie glitch in the Matrix stories. Then a video popped up. If you ever see a man standing in the woods, smiling, turn around and leave. Don't talk to him, don't acknowledge him, just go. The video was filled with blurry footage, grainy night vision shots of figures lurking between trees, their faces barely visible. But the comments were what really caught their attention. He doesn't move like a person. He never breathes. No matter how far you run, he finds you. Sam's friends laughed it off. Yeah, okay, sure, one of them scoffed. Totally real. Sam chuckled along, but something about it unsettled him. The way the figures just stood there. By the time the fire burned low, the group started settling in for the night. Sam, however, needed to take a leak before crawling into his tent. He wandered away from the camp, stepping into the trees, the warmth of the fire fading behind him. The forest stretched out in eerie silence, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. Then, a shape, standing just beyond the trees. Sam's breath hitched. At first, he thought it was one of his friends, but as his eyes adjusted, his stomach twisted. It wasn't. The man stood perfectly still, half shrouded in darkness, tall, unmoving, a wide, unnatural grin stretched across his face. His eyes, dark, hollow pits, locked onto Sam with an intensity that made his skin crawl. A cold wave of fear settled over him. "Hey man, you lost?" Sam forced out, his voice sounding too small in the vast, empty woods. No response, just that grin. A grin that never wavered, never twitched, never broke. Then Sam noticed something worse. The man wasn't breathing. No rise and fall of his chest. No misty breath in the cold night air. Nothing. A sickening realization crawled up Sam's spine. Whatever he was looking at wasn't alive. The moment his brain processed that thought, he moved. He turned and sprinted back to camp, feet pounding against the dirt, lungs burning. He didn't look back. He couldn't. By the time he'd burst into the clearing, his friends startled awake. "Do? What the hell?" one of them grumbled. Sam hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing. Just thought I saw something." He tried to laugh it off, tried to act normal, but the unease curled in his stomach like a parasite. They turned in for the night, but Sam lay awake, the canvas walls of the tent feeling paper thin. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself to sleep. Then, a whisper, right outside the tent. "Found you." His blood turned to ice. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The air inside the tent felt suffocating, pressing down on his chest. Slowly, he turned his head toward the thin fabric of the tent wall. A shadow loomed outside, tall, motionless, smiling. He shut his eyes, pulled the sleeping bag over his head, held his breath. Minutes passed, hours. By the time morning came, the shadow was gone. Sam never told his friends what he had heard. He didn't have to. The dark circles under his eyes said enough. Later, when he shared his experience on TikTok, the video exploded. Thousands of comments flooded in. "I saw him too. He never breathes. I ran, but he found me. He always finds you." Sam locked his phone, heart hammering. Because in the reflection of his screen, just for a second, he thought he saw a shadow, standing, smiling, and waiting. Some stories don't have a clean ending. Some mysteries stay mysteries. The truth is, there are things out there that defy explanation, and sometimes they find you first. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real horror stories. And if you've ever had a chilling experience like these, share it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Stay safe out there. And if you have your own terrifying experience, post on TikTok, just be ready for the replies.